Hi, Jody.
Hi, Morgan. I know that little space of yours, having just been with you in St. Louis last, I guess, for a couple of days. I sat in your office and I got to sniff around and see everything that you have. I got to say, I'm very impressed.
It's organized, isn't it?
It is, but it's also really reflects who you are as a person. Like you have your things that feel spiritually good for you. So I like that. Actually, I have my plant here. I got this heart plant, right? This cactus. And it's pretty crazy that it started with the one heart. And then it
Oh my
grew two
gosh.
more. And I considered that for you and your brother. And then when you were pregnant, it grew the third one. It grew that one. I'm like, look at this thing.
That's pretty crazy. I am now in the part of pregnancy where I'm hungry, but I'm not actually hungry. I'm interested in eating.
Right.
And I also
You have no
went
room.
I have room to eat smaller meals during the day. And then I also like even the shirt I'm wearing now, was looser before. And now I put on, I go, this feels like a little boy's shirt that I just
What's
put
the
on.
show we're watching on Apple? Margot's Got Money Problems.
Yes, with Elle Fanning. So funny. I mean, her boobs are out a lot. And but Elle Fanning is
I told you
fantastic.
the breastfeeding is the hardest part that no one really talks about because the labor and delivery, they first of all, you have like a true, woman. I don't know what are you, Gen Z now at 31 years old?
I'm a
You have
millennial.
millennial. There's so much technology, like you're having ultrasounds and there's a lot of information. So by the time you get there, you're not concerned as much that the umbilical cord or the baby's breech, like so much.
Yeah, you know more information going into it, and obviously things can always happen when you're in there, but you just have so much more insights into what's
Right, but
going
what you
on
don't have
inside of
insight
you.
into is the breastfeeding, and that is like a whole like, when had you and your brother, no one explained it to me, and your grandmother did not nurse a child, so I was the first generation doing it, and holy hell, that is an experience, and on Margot's Got Money Problems, you really see it, and Michelle Pfeiffer's hilarious. Anyways, I really, recommend that show. What else we have on the daily grind here?
So we had an article come out over the weekend in PitchBook written by Michael Bodley. And the name of the article says employees at mega IPO candidates are opting out of tender offers in a quote champagne problem. And it says it really focused the most on Anthropic. And Anthropic's recent tender offer fell short of its 6 billion target, an investor in the company said. And for somebody who's unfamiliar with these tender offers, it's the ability or the opportunity for an individual to sell their shares before the company has a liquidity event.
Right, so this is
And
for, let's reiterate and break it down further. This is for a private company where an employee
right,
comes on and they get, options. So they get the ability to buy their equity so that when there is a liquidity event, maybe if they paid $10 a share and the liquidity event is going to be at $1,000 a share, they get the difference of the spread. So this could be a lot of money, and we've seen with many companies that there hasn't been a liquidity, so they're holding on to that $10 option that maybe they have purchased or not. But it's different than in a public company where you get granted stock because that is on a public market. So it's already got a value. And so there's a way now for private companies to have earlier liquidity, which is where what you're talking about in a tender offer or what the PitchBook article said.
right. So the quote that Jody gave, or the quote that was included in the article, was that with a company of this magnitude, which in this case is Anthropic, employees think the company is going to be worth more than any secondary price. Even the later employees feel this way. If you're lucky enough to be at a company like this, you're very excited. You think it's going to be real wealth creation and you believe it.
You believe it so far that you stand by it and you do not sell any of your stock, your options before the
Right.
liquidity event because you believe that no matter what someone offers you today, it's going to be worth more later.
Right. And then next part of this article with Jody's quotes and Michael Bodley's, pieces in between it says historically startup employees took salary cuts in exchange for future windfalls via equity, but companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, and SpaceX pay at the top of the market in both compensation elements, mitigating the immediate financial needs that typically drive tender participation.
Right. Well, that means that companies like this, they're paying up, and we saw this again. I saw this in another article talking about how the rents are getting so high in San Francisco because all of these AI employees are have more cash than ever because they're not skimping. The employers are not skimping on cash or equity for that matter, but the salaries are really high, even for somebody junior. And so the competition for apartments and other things is higher than ever because people have money to spend.
Yeah, San Francisco goes is I think of San Francisco as a wave city. It always ebbs and flows depending on what's going on. I mean, you've seen up and down and up and down, and during COVID, there was no it was no secret that San Francisco has really
Down.
struggled. And now with this AI wave, it's San Francisco has been revived because there is just so much going on. It's really an AI hub more than I think any other city because it has, first of all, San Francisco is a 7 by 7 city. It's not very large. So you have a lot of people concentrated into a small space and then combined with all the infrastructure and office spaces and everything else. So I'm always rooting for San Francisco as it being a hometown, but I think it's great.
Yeah, well, you think it's great because 'cause you're not renting an apartment there as you happily sit in St.
Right.
Louis in your house,
Right.
that if you wanted to spend the same amount of money on a place in San Francisco, you could buy maybe a, studio. I mean,
Oh,
there's a
I mean, if that, I
if
think it'd
that,
be a studio in a place I wouldn't really necessarily wanna be living in.
right, in an up
But
and coming neighborhood, but even at this point, most of those up and coming neighborhoods are still already on the take versus on
right.
the down low, so
Right, and then we always like to touch a little bit on what we're reading in the Wall Street Journal. Jody sent me an
the
article
sports section,
about
I sort of vacillate between reading the business section and the markets, and then I love the sports section being from Buffalo and having growing up with the Buffalo Sabres and the Buffalo Bills. I even grew up when Buffalo had a basketball team, so still a fan.
well, you have to say this gentleman's last name, Victor.
Victor Wembanyama,
Yeah, there we
the
go.
French
So
basketball player. He's a
right,
badass.
and
He's 7'4". He does have a nickname because we're not the only ones who have struggled with his name. People call him Wemby.
yeah, he is 22 years old, and what I think was interesting is that they focus on the article about the 3rd year leap and how the 3rd year leap is an important benchmark throughout NBA history, the stage at which certain phenoms take the crucial step towards superstardom. And they talked about
Yeah.
James reached his first postseason in his 3rd year in the pros, and Michael Jordan won the first of 10 scoring titles at the same point with the Chicago Bulls. Like the 3-year timeline in the NBA seems to be that sweet spot where if you're destined for greatness, that's your
You
acceleration
see it.
point.
You know what it shows you? The same thing that we're seeing with these AI companies is that having the talent and being the first one, to get to the end point faster, it really does matter. And it's the same thing with Wemby. He is just been an incredible athlete and he's obviously a team player and he loves it. And then his height, and he got there in a way, he's getting there faster than all of these other LeBron and obviously Michael Jordan. It really impressive. So fun to
Yeah.
watch.
The last piece that I did read in the article that stood out to me too was talking about what he was doing in the off season to come back for a revenge tour because he didn't end last season in great physical shape. He had a shoulder injury. And so in this article it said over the off season he went to extreme lengths to make sure his body was in optimal shape for this revenge tour. And then he spent more than a week in China studying kung fu and meditating with monks.
Well, that's right up our alley because
Right.
we have learned that having that holistic nature, how you do anything is how you do everything. And he's learning at a young age, which is good at 22 years old, to incorporate all these elements because you can't just go down one highway. You've got to have on and off ramps that add in other components that really contribute to your success as a person.
Yeah. It really and I think a lot of it too is that when you see somebody performing in a game, right? And like we talked about this last week with Rory McIlroy with the Masters, is that there's so much prep that goes into it that when you see somebody out there actually competing, that's just such a small sliver of time compared to how much time they've invested along the way to be mentally and physically prepared for that moment. Like it's not just that one moment in time. It's really
Well, and they're
everything that built up
goes
to
into
that.
it, and they're playing to win, but they're part of a team, which is very different than Rory, and we know this from Michael Jordan's success that he knew it wasn't just about he performed, but how he performed as part of a team. So Wemby
Right.
seems to really have gotten that. So we'll
Right.
continue to watch. Okay,
Yeah.
let's roll into our guests for today.
There's 2 pieces before it. So one is really, and this will lead into it, but the consumer piece, right? Because our guest is a direct to consumer brand, which we really can't get into without talking about what's going on with Allbirds. And for somebody who's been unfamiliar with Allbirds, is there been a shoe company, like these wool runners, and a week ago, Allbirds made wool sneakers, and then on April 15th, it made people rich. And this came from a Forbes article talking about how a shoe company became an AI stock in one day. And what's interesting is that Allbirds has been a direct to consumer brand. They make these wool sneakers that go in the washing machine. They went public in November 2021. And I'm quoting this from this Forbes article because I did not know this beforehand. But they went at $15 per share and they traded above 4 billion in market cap. And on Tuesday, they announced the stock closed at 249 and the company was worth $20.8 million. And the
Crazy
only
the
thing that
plummet. So they
changed,
went from what high to what low?
they went from the high of $15 a share, and then they went to 249. That's when they went
Right.
public, and then when the stock closed, right? So the revenue had fallen to 152 million, and the losses were $77 million. Most of the physical stores had been closed. The only thing left was the ticker itself. Right. So then Allbirds sold the brand, the product line, the name on the shoe, everything to American Exchange Group. And American Exchange Group is an acquirer known for reviving dormant consumer brands. And they bought it for $39 million. So
Fire
then they
sale,
said,
literally a fire sale. Talk about a
right,
fall from grace.
right. So they scrapped
But
the entire
yeah,
company and they pivoted, which is important. They pivoted to say, and they were asked the shareholders to revoke its status as a public benefit corporation and strip environmental conservation language out of the charter and become a GPU leasing company, like an AI infrastructure company. And
it's
it
pretty
totally
crazy. And
changed
now they've
the
been doing well again.
completely. They've done extremely well. It's been an entire game changer. And I think we talk about this with so many entrepreneurs and investors and innovators who come onto the podcast that you have to be flexible to change and you have to
Right.
be willing to pivot. And that really leads us, especially into our guest today, who's Kaylin Roche, who is the formerly first employee at theSkimm and brand and marketing strategist for startups. She started a company, founder and CEO of JIGGY Puzzles, but has since been acquired and is now getting into angel investing as well as the CEO of Roche Development, which is a founder led investment firm with a dual focus, national innovation and regional revitalization, namely in Buffalo, New York. Hi, Kaylin. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Well, I will start kick this off. So, Kaylin, you and I met during Art Basel, actually, because I went to your house with my mom and dad for an event through the Albright Knox Art Gallery in Buffalo. And they had sort of an entourage here in Miami. And it turns out you and I have quite a few things in common with the Buffalo connection. But for those of you that are listening and new, maybe you could give us a little background, Kaylin, about your many different levers that you are lanes that you operate in, and some from the past, some current, and then where you're headed in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess best place to start. I grew up in California and I moved out to New York for college. So I went to Barnard and was really interested in current events and a poli sci major. And so my first job, I did a brief stint in management consulting. And then I met these two young female co founders who were starting a media company called theSkimm. The concept was to be a daily skim of the news, so delivered in an
I had it because I have
yeah,
such a low attention span that I really love the skim because it gave me, if I wanted a deeper dive, it was great, but it gave me just what I needed to,
right.
keep me relevant.
Yeah, start the day, know what everyone's talking about. So I was fascinated by the email newsletter trend and that as kind of a delivery vehicle for information and for news, and was really interested in millennials and how they were connecting to current events. So I joined the Scam as its first employee and ended up staying there 4 years from about 100,000 subscribers to like 8 million. So it was these like really hyper
Crazy.
growth, fun, yeah, super creative,
How did you
young
do that?
team. I mean, it was kind of the perfect storm.
People ask a lot. They're like, "What is it like to be an early or a first employee of essentially a startup?" And
Mhm.
obviously, so much of it is the fact that it's innovative, which we talk about a lot, but from somebody who actually did it and who was the first employee and then was there for the scale of it, can you tell us what it
Mhm.
was like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, it has to start with the idea. It needs to be relevant and sticky, and timing is so important for things like this. And I'll get to the company I ended up founded, but same thing, like my timing with Jiggy. So, timing, the idea, finding that product market fit. Who are your users? What problem are you solving for them? And once you find that fit, how do you scale that? Once you find who your people are, how do you continue to get in front of them? How do you create
Right.
the flywheel effect? So they're all telling each other and spreading word of mouth and like working on your behalf as your ambassadors. And then, of course, approaching it kind of top level from media and PR and
Right.
marketing, of course, like running ads on social media.
Right. So you were the first employee, which sounds like it gave you the crash course on what it was
Mhm.
to watch founders take an idea and scale it. And then, so you were at the Skim for how long? And then what did you do after?
Yeah, so I was at the Skim for 4 years, and it totally, as you said, it kind of demystified the whole process of starting a company. I think a lot of times people have ideas or, want to become entrepreneurs, but it sounds so unapproachable or don't even know where to start. And so watching it first as, on such an intimate level and from the ground floor really helped demystify and break down what the steps are and how I could do it myself. So a couple years into the scam, I ended up having the idea for Jiggy and didn't leave for years more because I was really enjoying the work and the timing just wasn't right. But being a part of an early startup is incredible. It's also all consuming, and I was definitely reaching points of burnout at various times in that journey. And I tried yoga and meditating and all these things people were talking about, but what really clicked for me was doing jigsaw puzzles. And so I'd like pour a glass of tea or wine and do like 30 to 45 minutes of a jigsaw puzzle every single night. And so over years, I was, doing like 1,000-piece puzzle every week. And I really wanted to like elevate the puzzle experience. Everyone I could find was like grandma's puzzles with some stock photography of like a cottage or animals. And I really wanted to elevate it. I had grown up in LA and my mom had founded an arts nonprofit. So I was always surrounded by the art community. And so I kind of put these two together and wanted to create beautiful modern puzzles supporting the work of female artists. So each of the puzzle designs was original artwork by a female artist who received a profit share model. So they got a percentage of every sale, and redesigned all the packaging. So it was very giftable and, Instagrammable and all of that. And I ended up thinking on this for a couple years while still working at the Skim. But once I left, I dove into Jiggy and then launched in 2019. So it was one of
So
those
somewhere
things.
in there, and I don't wanna jump the gun, but somewhere in there, you ended up on Shark Tank.
Yes. Yeah. So, it was one of those things where thinking on it, let the idea take shape. And then, crazy universe, I ended up launching 4 months before COVID. I went right into the first holiday season, which is always peak for a product like this. So went into holidays of
Right.
2019 and then immediately went into 2020. People were stuck at home looking for things to do. So it
Right. It's kind
opened
of
up a
Time
prime
to
definite
work in your
time.
door.
favor. Yeah.
Right.
But banana bread, sourdough, and puzzles, right? And so retailers, press, media, all these things started opening up that, I think I was confident I could get to eventually, but it just happened so much quicker than I ever
Right.
expected. And then the producers of Shark Tank called. So I ended
So
up
they
going.
reached out to you.
They found me, I think, in some media hit or social media, and they reached out to me. And then you prepare and film, and then it doesn't air for a period of time, so it ended up airing in spring of 2021.
Who was your
Which
favorite Shark Tank person?
was
Judge or who?
incredible. Judge. So
Go ahead.
I was really glad on my panel that I had Mark Cuban, who is ended up being who I did a deal with. I
Right.
just loved watching him, in prepping for the show. I watched every single episode ever, and I just thought he had really thoughtful feedback, and it seemed like whether he invested or not, he like respected the entrepreneur and took the time to like really give his 2 cents, not just as with some of them like getting a soundbite in, for their own persona or branding. I also had a guest shark, which I thought was fun because sometimes they pull in different
Right.
expertise. So mine was Daniel Lubetsky, who founded Kind Snacks. So obviously it was a
Interesting.
mission driven,
New food
food and
piece
bev,
of it.
but mission driven.
Right.
Yeah, so that was cool, and I wish I had Barbara because I also love her take and just the whole female founder angle, but she wasn't on my panel, but they were all, even Mr.
It's
Wonderful, who
cool.
everyone gets scared of sometimes,
I'm fun
Right.
I found them all, like, really fun.
I really, I watch Shark Tank the most when I'm at the gym because they don't.
Mhm.
At this point, my gym has moved away from putting any news on, which I think it's cruel, first and foremost, to put any cooking show on when somebody's exercising. I'm like, this is not
Yeah,
the
right.
right thing to put on the TV, like hot dogs and cornbread souffle. You're like, this is rude. But
Yeah.
I do see a lot of Shark Tank now, and I honestly I think of you every time now because it really you think about how many founders and entrepreneurs have gone through because obviously it's a TV show, but it is
Right.
real. And the people and the sharks are business people. And I've seen a lot of episodes with Bethany Frankel sitting in as a guest shark. I've seen
Mhm.
episodes with Emma Green
Right.
sitting and who are all extremely successful in their own right. But you have that flavor as a female entrepreneur who's really savvy. And I think from even stalking your LinkedIn, is that you have that marketing edge. You know how to get in touch with the consumer and how to speak that language, which is really, really hard because you either have that or you hire somebody who has that.
Mhm. Right, completely, and if
Yeah.
you don't have it, and you totally can hire somebody for it as long as they also really understand the brand, right? I think it's much easier to hire just somebody with a skill set around performance marketing who knows how to run an ad on Facebook and can tinker with the
Right.
numbers, but somebody who really understands and kind of embodies the brand itself is much harder to outsource as a founder. And I think that it comes up in every little thing you do, right? You want that brand consistency in every touch point someone will see, from an Instagram post to your email marketing to an
Right.
interview,
We
a
say
quote
how
or an
you do
interview.
anything is how you do everything. And if you're
Exactly.
clear on well, you have the role that I appreciate, and Morgan is headed into this role, but you have a founder CEO role. You are a partner. You have a husband, but doesn't have to be a husband, and you're a mom. You have children, so you really run in many lanes. Do you find that there is like a consistent theme that you use across all of this to keep yourself, like, you're not doing jigsaw puzzles as much anymore because you don't have the time, but what is the sort of brand that you've developed just as a woman doing this and running at all these different areas? Is there a Kaylin Roche brand and some kind of mindset that you keep across all of this?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. I think it really comes down to what the outcome, what the impact, what effect you want to have on people you're interacting with, you're selling a product to, you're, doing business with, because The product will change. I'm not doing jigsaw puzzles as much. I sold that business and have been doing other ventures, but the effect and how, you carry yourself and how the community, whether it's customers or business partners, or for me now, I'm doing a lot of angel investing and advising. So, the founder community and venture capital community that now I'm interacting with more. We're doing some, Buffalo real estate and investment. And so, how do those communities, what is the outcome and what is your impact on them? So I try to lead with that. And because I think, to your point, Morgan, of not, hiring out for it when it is organic and when it is your natural orientation, I think it carries through much more seamlessly.
Yeah. You touched on a couple of things. So, one, that you sold Jiggy. How did you know the deal was the right deal for you to take?
Yeah. It was so I had reached a point where the business where, and this is something I will like preach, to any founder, is I think there's so much attention around, raising as many dollars as possible and these sexy headlines of, these big rounds and which institutional VC has backed you and stuff. And
Right.
I think you can get so far with good old bootstrapping and
Right.
alternative capital and running on cash flow and just really smart, savvy cash flow management. And so I decided to take that path for most of the Jiggy journey, and yeah, sidebar conversation, but have a ton of thoughts around like founders starting bootstrapped, and even if they do raise, getting to the point where the economics are so much better for them, and they don't give up so much equity of their company because they've already had that traction and metrics. But that said, there reaches a tipping point, right? Where you need growth capital to scale, you need to inject, you need to hire, spend on marketing, release new product lines, do those inventory runs. So at a certain point, it will take investment. And so I was kind of at this fork in the road where I was like, either I need to raise money and go hire out for all those things, or I need to find a partner who's done it before, knows what to do, and can be a, majority or full acquirer. So I was pursuing those in parallel, and then a deal ended up coming through. They had a portfolio of consumer brands, said they had scaled each one and showed how. They have this whole in-house team. They do all the performance marketing. They have a supply chain expert. So I was like, not only is that, those are the resources I need
It
to
fits.
take
And it was at the
Jiggy.
timing where you're ready. You were ready
And
too.
the timing, I was ready. Yeah. So it was a timing for myself personally, timing for the business at this kind of inflection point, and then a partner who had the experience that complemented my own. So that's what gave me the
I think
confidence.
it's a good segue because, and we could talk about your business angle all the time, but somewhere in this, you got married and you had a family, and there's a Buffalo connection, which of course I totally love. Being from Buffalo, you and I met in Miami in this like whole bougie environment,
Yeah.
but I'd like to hear about how you met your husband and then the connection to Buffalo and how that feels because we've
Yeah.
talked about like having kids in Miami versus having kids in Buffalo. And of course, Morgan sits in St. Louis with a child on the way, and we really have a high value proposition. We appreciate these places like Buffalo for the quality of life and the sensibility around work ethic and family values, but give us a little insight into the other
Agree with
side
you.
of your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. So meanwhile, as all this is happening, I had met my husband in the middle of COVID. It was New York City, socially distanced, our first dinner date, like we were 6 feet apart. We were like 12 feet apart from any other table. There were like the plastic barricades between us. Bizarre, bizarre time, but also accelerated relationships in that like we were
Yeah.
all work from home. So like you got to see each other in every environment. I was running
Yeah.
Jiggy, he was doing his law firm. We were in the same apartment. So we met in March of 2021. He
Wow.
was then in New York City. He was moving down to Miami for work like 6 months later. We moved in 3 months later. He moved to Miami 6 months later. I came down with him, and then we were married and pregnant within a year of that. So it was one of those, we were in our early 30s. It was just kind of,
Timing.
So that, yeah, that moved
I
really
think that's really
quickly.
true. I mean, we know a few people where we wish that they could. What we hope they listen because we wish that they would understand that if it's meant to work, then you know, and it does not take all these laps around.
Yes. No. I heard once, if you know, if it's not right, you'll be confused, or you'll
Yeah,
like not sure their intentions. Like if there's any question, it's a no. And that's,
right.
like F
A
yes or
maybe
no.
is a no. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I
Yes,
had,
exactly.
my it's interesting because my husband and I initially met for the first time on our first day of college. We lived on the same dorm floor,
Wow.
and we reconnected in October of 2019, and we were long distance between St. Louis and San Francisco. And in the same
Yeah.
way, in your case, COVID completely accelerated our
Mhm.
relationship, but I texted my mother the day after getting together, and she was like, "How was your night?" And I was like, "I met my husband, I swear." And,
And
you
Morgan
know,
is the person we say this because Morgan is the person who is like in the grocery store at the whatever food item,
I will stand
Googling
in
it and
Yeah.
research. She
I
hesitates.
no, I stand in the freezer section, I'm like, "Do I want raspberry sorbet or do I want mint chocolate chip or do I want coffee chocolate chip
Yeah.
or do I
Right.
not want any of this? I probably don't need any of this." And then I
Right.
walk away and then I come back, like, it's rinse repeat for me. So, the fact that I was so sure, it is true, like, when
Decisive.
you do
Mhm.
there isn't that, like, "Do I like him? Do I not like him? Like, do I
Right.
know?"
Talk yourself
But
into it, talk yourself out of it.
correct, right, but I think it is really interesting because obviously COVID is such a blip on a screen in the grand scheme of things, but when it comes to business and relationships, which is exactly back to what Jody was talking about how you do anything is how you do everything, and when you have that holistic mindset, you start to see you can't segregate the different areas of your life, of you being a CEO, and of you being a wife, and then of you being a mother, like, when you're the common denominator, the best way, and I think the most efficient, for lack of a better word, is when everything flows together.
Totally. Yes. I think that's so, and like when those are in conflict, it I think is when it gets really tricky of like
Yeah,
resentment. I'm not being the best operator or mother or wife, or
right.
there are opportunity costs of doing one and not the other. And if those are either just, from a bandwidth or your mental
Yeah,
space, like just if they're not in alignment, I think that can be a really tricky
pay
place
for
to
it.
be. So that was
Yeah,
another consideration. I was pregnant with my first. I was like, I don't know what motherhood will be like and how I'll feel afterwards. And so the idea of still staying in the Jiggy experience and staying, I ended up staying on working for the acquirer, but not being the be all end all. When you're a solo entrepreneur, you close your computer and nothing happens, right? Like no one else is doing it except for you.
yeah,
And I just felt that probably would be inconsistent with how I wanted to experience my first newborn,
right.
period of life. And so that was another real consideration.
How many kids do you have now, and what are you doing with the work in Buffalo?
Yeah. So I now have two children. My son is 2.5. So this all happened 2.5 years ago. And then
Oh,
my daughter is going to be 1 next week.
oh my god.
So we did the two under two madness for the first 6 months. They're 18 months apart, but we've hit our stride, and it's just getting more and more fun every day. And so when the Buffalo component is, I met Kyle.
Your husband's from Buffalo.
Yes, yes.
Right. When
And,
you're from Buffalo,
I
that's just like in your DNA. So
mm,
you're the you're the gift
100%.
with purpose. You got him and now you
Yeah.
get Buffalo.
I never stood a chance of keeping him away from Buffalo for a
Mhm.
minute. And, I had like heard of Buffalo, but I can't say that like it, was very
As a
top of
California
mind. But
kid. Yeah, you're like,
Yeah,
"Where?"
yeah, yeah, but, as yes, people from Buffalo love Buffalo, and the
And
hometown
that's probably what
pride
you now that you know Buffalo, that's probably what you really appreciate about him is sort of
so
those
much.
that loyalty, that ride or die, that Bills Mafia for, the
Yes.
whole it is a breed like nowhere else.
Yes, it is an identity and community, and, I grew up in LA, I like LA, like, do I feel this huge hometown pride affinity for Los Angeles? Not really, and to see just, like, the value systems, and I think when you have kids, I was like, New York, ride or die, and then, Miami Beach, like, this lifestyle, and I think having kids, I'm like, I just want good, normal people and, good, like, schools and soccer and, like, it just changes the prioritization so much. So we started talking a lot more about where we were gonna raise kids, and, my husband's always, wanted to go make his career and bring it back to Buffalo and reinvest in the community, open offices, hire people locally. And there's one area downtown. He went to Canisius and spent a lot of his high school experience downtown. And so there was one neighborhood downtown in particular called Allentown that he started getting really interested in. And so we started, spending some time there. We ended up getting married there. And there were a lot of properties coming available, a lot of beautiful, like, historic, working with the city on the preservation society and these really beautiful buildings, but needed a lot of TLC. And
I
so
mean, I
we
used to go to these
started
bars in Allentown growing up, right? We talked about this. I
Yes,
mean, Allentown was like the place where you needed a lot of alcohol to go because God forbid you actually saw where you were going or the lights were on and you could see the floor or the
right,
bathroom or anything, let alone like where they were cooking food and pouring cocktails. You would have been mortified. No
right,
wonder we're all so hardy because it was really
right.
kind of gritty, but in a very formidable way. So, and then there was in Allentown, there was a lot of the arts going on in the
Yes.
community. Like they tried to have festivals, so it really has come full circle that you and your husband are involved in this.
Yes, completely. I think it is one of those, our neighborhood in New York City was similar, Williamsburg, which was a very super industrial, was pretty economically depleted. The artist community grew, then this kind of hipster community grew. Now it's like young families and parks and the Domino's Sugar Factory and like Whole Foods and everything.
Totally.
And we absolutely love it. It still has that character, but it's an incredible place to actually live now. And so I think there's a lot. And with the medical corridor, I think a really interesting part of Allentown is this huge investment and this draw of the medical profession. There are residents, young med students, residents who are, looking to live near work. They want to be in walking distance or a short drive, but they also want, to be in their mid late 20s and have a cool coffee shop and maybe a nice
Right.
gym, and they want places to, do their other day-to-day living that is comfortable and more elevated. So there's, yes, a big vision for a
Opportunity.
more bustling kind of young population actually living in Allentown.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a difference, right? I mean, the real estate investing has become so hot over the last couple of years. I mean, it's always been lucrative, but especially taking these areas like downtown St. Louis has a lot of similarities to Buffalo, where
Mhm.
um, downtown St. Louis right now is not really a livable place. There's no grocery store. There's no
Right,
drugstore. Like there is no gym.
right.
There's no infrastructure for people to be inclined to want to live there. There are sports stadiums, and it's really similar to
Mm,
Buffalo in the sense that they are mad about their teams. But
Yeah.
it's that
right.
that drop off happens. So when especially for you talking about it from the medical perspective and having people who are there for their careers, you're kind of backing into, well, how can we make you not want to commute to work? How can we build in all the layers of infrastructure around you? But
Exactly.
It sounds like you've already had a lot of success with this. Where are you in terms of, did you raise outside capital from other investors for the real estate fund? Or, I mean, obviously you mentioned that you're doing angel investing, but I would think it's a little bit of a different price tag between one and the other.
Yes. Yeah, we have both not we haven't gone out and raised a fund from more institutional like LPs or lenders, but there are just been have been other individuals. So we have started to pull in just some other individual, partners who are interested in this development to be able to further the impact as well as working very closely with the city and state. There's so much interest and kind of goodwill and everyone wants this to happen. It's just who's going to drive it, who's going to invest in it. So, working with different grants and again, historic preservation kind of allocations. So, working on keeping that character because that's ultimately, what it's charming and there's so much history there, but doing essentially full rehabs in the interior. So
It's almost
um
like a family office. Like you and your
exactly.
husband have both been successful entrepreneurs, and have been very involved in this. We're on the compensation front discussing when family offices or families who the founders are the innovators and the people who have been entrepreneurs who have had some success. So they bring that money back into an investment mindset, and then they make a fund or some kind of real estate investment trust or something, and then in addition to that, they take other investors or other family money to make sure that it's not only their own resources or to have the strength of everyone together.
Exactly.
In
Yes.
your wildest dreams, did you think this is where you were going to be at this stage of your life, having already sold a company and having two children? And when you had the two under two, straddling your time between you're still a little bit New York and then Miami and Buffalo. So how does this feel and
No.
what's next on the horizon for you?
No, it really does not. And I will tell you, this has all happened. We just celebrated March this month. Not wedding day our first date 5 years ago. So sometimes I look at him, I'm like, "I've only literally known you for 5 years." We have 2 kids, running businesses together, splitting our time, but it's a totally different life than I necessarily carved out if I were predicting the future, 5 years ago. But I think that's how it happens, right? What's that? We plan,
My
God
grandmother
laughs.
always used to say, "We make plans and God laughs." So, or, just
Exactly. And I think, I wouldn't have it any other way. If you asked me in college, I was going to do management consulting and then go to law school and to have a much more structured path. The SKIM experience really just kind of opened this door and showed me that creating something wasn't, this unattainable, thing that I might have thought and that I watched them do it and now I can go out and do it. And now working with companies as an angel and advisor, kind of paying that forward. I always thought kids were in my future. I wasn't growing up like super maternal. My sister was like wanted to be a teacher, kids. And I was more like, okay, we'll get there. But now it really has become just like the greatest joy. And I think there are so many parallels. Like you are like running a household and now a family in many ways. There, I pull a lot of like running a company, and it's been really fun. I love this parenting expert who says that parenting. I'm hitting the toddler stage now, so I've been focused on how to deal with toddlers. She's like,
right.
think of it like as a parent, you are the pilot of an airplane. Like the passenger doesn't want to hear I think we might need to like make a stop to refuel. I'm not sure, but I'll keep you guys posted or that like you are in command. They are safe. They are in your
Right.
care. And so I'm really trying to embody my like founder mom pilot era to bring my toddler through
That's
through
gonna be the name of the podcast. That's it right there. Founder, mom, and pilot.
Pilot
Yes.
era. That's the most
Yeah.
important
Yeah.
piece of it. Yeah, pilot era. I mean, it's so true. I think, we've talked about this on I sat at dinner with, for a fundraiser in St. Louis with a couple of other couples, and I was sitting next to my girlfriend who has 2 boys, and they're, like, 2.5 years apart, and she works for a corporation, and they talking to her about a promotion and what the promotion's going to entail and how the work's going to expand and what the new role is, and of course, she knows I work in compensation. I said, "So what's going on the comp discussion? You're not going to take on all this responsibility and not
Mhm.
have a raise of some kind." And she's like, "I know I'm underpaid." And I said, "Okay, well, how do you know you're underpaid?" And she's like, "Well, I just know for myself, like I know that I'm not making enough money." I'm like, "Well, do you have data?" And she's like, "No." It's like, "Okay, well, I can look at data for you on the private side, and that will give you a
Right.
ballpark, but I don't
Not
do
probably
the."
not that different.
No, it wasn't. Told her the range of, like, a comparable job title, and she's like, "I don't have the chutzpah to go out there, like, I don't wanna jeopardize the promotion." But then she
Yeah.
tells me, "But if I don't get the promotion, if I don't get a raise, I'm gonna quit my job." I go, "Well, that
Not
makes no
even worth
sense."
going to work.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
even worth going to work.
Right, because she's like, "Well, I'm willing to
Mhm.
walk away." Well, I'm like, "Well, before
Yeah.
you're just willing to walk away and throw down the towel, you at least can say, "Can we talk about the comp?"
Mhm.
2 days
Yeah.
later, she texts me and she's like, "I got my number and then some." And it's exactly
Ah,
and the whole thing
good
that
for
I had
you,
said to her.
Morgan. You made a difference to someone.
You know what? But I think about Kaylin exactly what you're saying, where it's like, I said to her, she's with 2 boys. I'm like, "Do you negotiate with your sons?" And she's like, "God, no, never. I'm in charge." And I'm like, "That's the same thing."
It's just
It's
with the
exact
arrows going in a different direction, right? For Kaylin,
right,
for you, you're easy to be a boss, and now you're
right,
remembering this at home. And this
right,
woman is doing it at home, and now she has to
Right.
remember. And I think that's a good way to finish up because we're going to
totally.
finish where we started, and that is it is all holistic. It is all tied together with your places in New York and Miami and Buffalo. I think you're the luckiest person in the world. 2 children, a husband, you work, you have, a wonderful
We're
family
knocking
as
on
you
wood.
described.
There we go. I'm
Knock on
knocking on
wood,
wood.
right?
I mean, I think a lot of it where you've really been an innovator in so many different ways because you've been ahead of the curve. I mean, and so much of it is the timing piece, but timing's only one piece of it, but you have made it happen in every single arena. And that part is really timing, schmiming, whatever, because when you had the opportunity for the rubber to hit the road, you stepped on the gas and you were like,
Well,
we're
that's what I
going.
wanna know. That's what I want the last question is, where did that come from? Do you think that was always in you? Did you have, like, some defining experience with, like, where your dad or your mom or someone said something to you or you saw something? How did you know how when the rubber met the road, you were not that kind of person who was not gonna step up? Like, where was it?
Yeah, I think it's always been there, and it's definitely been tested and brought out in various ways. I think there were a couple, and I love Morgan that I totally think, luck, timing. I love this definition. I heard that luck is when experience meets opportunity. And so, no, it does not just happen, right? But you're
Right.
in the time and place, the door is open, and are you walking through that door?
Right.
And I remember there was this one time, it was in 8th grade, my school had middle school debate class. And at the end, you each give a speech, a debate speech. And I was preparing. And at one point, a teacher pulled me aside and gave me like some pretty harsh critique on the position I had taken, at what, 12, that I was about to get in front of the middle school the next day and deliver the speech. And I went home crying and I was like, he said this about my stance. And I don't know, I still believe in what I said. And I still got up there, had a long talk with my mom about it, got up the next day and won the debate competition. And I think it is those moments where you're like, all right, I'm scared this could go wrong, but and this is what I tell my toddler, he's taking swim lessons. I'm like, being afraid is okay. The answer is not that you don't do it, it's that you do it anyway. You feel the fear and you still do the thing. You don't try to wish the fear away. And so I think
Great
that
thing.
has always been my approach of feel the
We
fear,
like
but do
that.
the thing anyway.
We like that. Don't let the fear stop you. Well, Kaylin, thank you so much. I look
Thank
forward to seeing you in
you.
one of your neighborhoods, ideally Buffalo or
Yes.
Miami, two of my
I
favorite
would love
stomping
that.
grounds.
I would love that. Thank you both.